Throughout this series, we have been looking at the joint heritage of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and how these three faiths share fundamental beliefs about the oneness of God, the importance of social justice, and the need to live a virtuous life. Yet even a casual glance at how these faiths interact reveals a stunning gap between the ideals of each religion and the reality of how its adherents live and treat one another.
As a rabbi and as somebody who tries to think about being Jewish in conceptual terms, I view this as a very extreme example of a consistent problem that we as Jews in the modern or postmodern era face, and that is power. For 2,000 years we haven't had it. Political power, physical power. And consequently, it has been possible for us to develop certain moral positions and certain traditions of high ethical behavior. We have also paid a dreadful price for our lack of power. And we now definitively are in an era of power, but we don't really know yet what to do with it. And that is a question of morals and ethics, which anybody who takes being Jewish and being a human being seriously has to be deeply concerned about.
I think the greatest message in the Quran is the fact that we are supposed to be seeking peace. And also, God does not love people who make war. And yet many people get the message that they should war on each other. But God prefers the peacemakers. Allah prefers the peacemakers. It's very clear. It's right in the Quran if people look for it.
Recently, Pope John Paul argued that one of the things that Christians ought to do as they prepare for the third millennium of the existence of Christian faith in our world, this third millennium since the arrival of Jesus, is to repent of the errors that have been perpetrated on others throughout history, including, for example, the Crusades, the torturing of people in the medieval period and later, because they did not hold the full faith in the way that the Roman Catholics understood it.
I think it's important to remember that anti-Semitism is very much alive nowadays, as much as it was alive 50 years ago. There are Jews in Russia nowadays that suffer anti-Semitism and suffer persecution, and that brings them luckily to Israel, which is able to provide shelter for them. And our parents' generation as well. My mother, for example, she was born in Poland, and they ran away to Siberia during the Second World War, and her experience of Christians was a horrible experience. So anti-Semitism is not something that belongs to the past for us, and I think that is one of the reasons why a lot of Israelis are very suspicious towards Christianity.
Right from the very beginning, when the church separated from the synagogue, there was already a very antagonistic group, the Jews against the Christians. And so for almost 2,000 years, we had the early church fathers writing very anti-Semitic things about the Jewish people. And we had the Jewish people also writing anti-Christian things, which we often don't realize. And this caused 2,000 years of aggravated relationships.
I think the history of the Crusades will never go away. And in fact, in modern history, today, when you look around the world, we've got crusades again against Islam. We've got it in Bosnia. We had it in Afghanistan. There are many places around the globe that it's still existing.
There is the question of the crusades of colonialism, some would argue present economic colonialism, and there is the Christian denigration of the Prophet and of the Quran that became part of the self-definition and understanding of most Christians.
One remarkable thing about these three communities is that they have suffered, each of them, a traumatic national tragedy in this, the 20th century. The Armenians were the first to undergo genocide before and during the First World War. Christians slaughtered by Muslim Turks, 1.5 million of them. In the Second World War, the Jews passed through the Valley of Death and we lost 6 million. Since the Second World War, the Palestinians have been massacred, not on a genocidal scale, but by different communities throughout the Middle East. Not just Israeli Jews, but also by their Arab brethren, wherever they've been residing.
History without remembrance and without regret is condemned to repeat its sad stories. Conscious of that, today's religious leaders feel compelled to reflect on what went wrong in the past, to examine the critical role religion played during periods of persecution, and finally, to ask, how does a people recover from being either the victimizer or the victimized?